When you're in hyper-growth phase, in a sector that's as dynamic and fast-moving as AI is, you need a particular type of people, right? Like people who would actually thrive in an environment that's a bit less structured, very dynamic. I use a framework for this. We call the ICCE framework. So it's intelligence, coachability, character, and experience.
Welcome back to Class Act Season 2, Navigating the AI Landscape. If you're a leader right now, you'll know this. AI has never been louder or more confusing. Every week, there's a new agent, a new model, a new promise. Today, I'm joined by Andre, AI Solutions Leader at Snorkel AI, formerly of DataRobot, and recognised in the DataIQ as one of the UK's most influential figures in data and AI. Andre has spent more than a decade in the trenches, applied AI teams from scratch, in hyper-growth, hired top technical talent, scaled DataRobot from one person in EMEA to over 30, and learned what makes AI projects succeed and why so many fail. He's also lived the evolution of AI up close, from classic machine learning to today's agentic era. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how great applied AI and AI engineering teams are built, how to hire the right people in a noisy, crowded market, and what leaders must get right if they want AI to deliver real business value. But if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. This really helps us a lot, and it will help us continue the conversation. And whether you're listening, tap the follow. You'll never miss an episode with leaders like Audrey. Andre, really good to have you here. Welcome to A Class Act.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here too.
No, thanks very much for joining us. I'm really excited about this one. I've been really keen to speak to you about this subject as well. So you've had a fascinating journey across DataRobot, Snorkel AI, and the broader AI landscape. For listeners who may not know your background, could you give us a snapshot of your career to date and experience that's most shaped what you think about AI today?
Yeah, sounds good. So I've been working with data maybe for 15 years and working specifically in applied AI for the past 12 years now. So I started in engineering and math. I have a master's in both. I initially started in finance, but as I was working in finance around 2010, 11, I found it was a bit too narrow in terms of application. And so I was looking for a technical field that would be much more applicable across sectors. And that's when I actually, at that time, Gartner was talking about data scientists, this new term, this new job, the sexiest job of the 21st century. And so I got interested and so I decided to actually complete my master's with an AI and machine learning specialization, as well as do a research project in Singapore, specifically in machine learning, because it was so early. Having some research experience was quite important. When I was there, actually, I met someone named Xavier Connor, who was the number one on Kaggle. It's a data science competition website that I guess a lot of you have heard about. And he was like the global number one. And so he was in the same research institute as me, but on the applied machine learning team. And kind of because he's French, we got to know each other and just became friends. But when I left Singapore, he actually told me that he was joining this brand new startup called DataRobot that just raised some seed funding. And I got interested at that time and got to know DataRobot, but very early on, there were just 5 employees. I went back to Europe, worked at Sky for 2 years in the big data team before actually DataRobot got in touch with me because they started to hire in Europe. And so that's how I became the first customer-facing data scientist of DataRobot in Europe. Initially, I started to work as a data science engineer on the DataRobot product before I moved on to more customer-facing roles, which was more interesting for me, right? So I stayed in total 8.5 years at DataRobot, and that was quite a journey. I joined Series A. We were just 70 employees globally. At one point in the company, we were more than 2,000 employees. My team in EMEA, we were just 2 people when I started. And I had to work engaging with customers in a market that was quite immature. We were trying to figure out how to actually build projects and value with machine learning at a point where literally most companies didn't even have any data scientists, right? So we were quite successful at that. We basically de facto, I was asked by the CEO and founder to actually build the EMEA team, or at least the technical teams in EMEA. So that's the data scientists, as well as some other roles like AI architects and some other roles that we needed for our customers. So I grew the team, as you mentioned, from just myself to 30 people, data scientists, based all of them in EMEA across different markets. Got to know and learn the hard way, make a lot of mistakes as well. So it was quite a fast journey. And then after that, I moved on to other leadership roles. So we almost went IPO in 2021. I think we hired too fast and hired a bit. Revenue didn't follow. And so we failed our IPO. And then 2022
Yeah.
came in, and it was like the moment where the market was really bad. So I had multiple leadership roles to stabilize the team, make it more efficient. But eventually, at one point, I decided that it was my time for my
Nice.
next adventure. And that's when Snorkel came into play. Snorkel like got in touch because they were looking for their first technical leader in EMEA and the first technical hire.
Yeah.
So like for me, it was going back to this phase of hyper growth that I was very interested in, and I really like found it. I'm very proud of like the first 4 years I had at DataRobot. And I joined Snorkel first to lead the EMEA AI engineering team. And recently I've been promoted to lead the global AI solutions engineering team. So that's my role right now. My main focus is on like developing a new and growing a new motion around enterprise end-to-end AI solutions. So we engage with companies and help them like deliver end-to-end AI system using agentic, using RAG, using different types of techniques. And like Snorkel has technology that helps actually make this motion more effective.
God, really exciting times at the moment. You're definitely in the place to be. It's quite funny. I don't even know if I've told you this
Yeah.
story. I can remember it was a long time ago. One of my colleagues at MBN was working the London market, and we were working across data with a lot of probably enterprise clients. So probably working with a lot of potential customers for a product like DataRobot. And we got a call, and me and my colleague just went to a wee small office in London. I think it was a lady called Yvonne. She actually showed us a demo of DataRobot before it was probably even a thing. Should have paid more attention back then and maybe invested. It's funny because just when I was having this conversation, I can always remember it was just like, look, come and look at this thing we're doing. And it was a demo, and look at the journey. Absolutely fascinating. Brilliant. Okay, and if you could pick one lesson you've learned the hard way about building applied AI teams, what would it be? And what happened that taught you that?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest lesson when you build an AI team for me, is not to overlook the business and or like soft aspect of applied AI. In particular, when the world of applied AI, it's not only a technical challenge, right? It's not only about the technical brilliance of the people you hire for the roles. It's also like how they are able to actually like ship. And what does it mean shipping? It means translating complex business requirements into technical requirements. It means reducing the complexity of projects, because it's by nature, AI and applied AI in particular is iterative. So involving the business with you in the journey of building the systems is almost more important than having the right technical approach for the system you're building. And so I think a lot of AI leaders are probably biased towards hiring a very technical talents, but sometimes that is not able to operate in an organization and to ship. And that's very important to actually hire pretty much everyone in your team with this kind of skills, like the softer skills that allows them to actually work with the business
I think that's
and delivering.
We're starting to see a lot, the explosion of this, the forward deployment engineers are calling maybe these people you're talking about at the moment. Massive hype around that. Yeah, definitely. So you've been in AI a long time. Before the current hype cycle, from your perspective, what's changed the most from early machine learning to today's agentic era, and what hasn't changed at all? And if you were advising a leader today, what would you tell them to prioritize right now?
I see it as there were multiple hype cycles, right? Because the word big data and the word data science, like there was a lot of hype. It was around like 2015 to 17 when it started to be the hype around that. Now the hype then became Gen AI recently, and then now the new hype is agentic AI. And they all go through the same hype cycle of Gartner, right? What's changed and what didn't change? I'd say the thing that's fundamentally changed with, in particular, Gen AI and now agentic AI is kind of like the interface between your system you're building and the users, the business, right? Like it's much more accessible now than it used to be. In the world of machine learning, what the output of the system is very often is, for a machine learning system, is a number or a class, like with those predictive models. Like, for example, you would like predict a number that forecasts the stock of a particular, let's say, item in one of your stores. That would be the output, right? But this number on its own doesn't mean much, right? Like it means maybe something if you integrate it into a business workflow or if you integrate it into a dashboard, right? However, like in the world of Gen AI and agentic, the output is actually already has a native natural language interface with the users. And so whether it's a chatbot or whether it's being able to prompt it, like that makes it much easier to grasp, right? it kind of like it's able to give you, let's say, outputs that anyone in the business should be able to understand, right, by nature. And that's like the fundamental bigger change that also made it created this hype that's even higher, because if it's easier to understand, it's also like people would project themselves more into using them, and then like the hype is even higher, right? But I'd say that's interface with the business. That's the first point. The second point, where there's also a fundamental change, is the interface for the AI engineer, like the builder, the person who builds the system. We used to have to code manually a lot of what we call features from the data to integrate into your model. Today, in the world of agentic and in the world of Gen AI, like the interface is prompts. You have to actually write natural language to be able to manipulate and optimize your system for your task, right? And it's very different from feature engineering in terms of skills, in terms of tasks. It's like a new technical challenge, if you want, right? The third thing is that's really changed is how fast you can go to show something, to show a demo. Back in the days, even showing like the prototype of your machine learning model would take weeks, like to have something that distance. Like now you can spin off like a nice interface with a pre-trained chatbot and have a few good examples to show the business within an hour. Even so, there's two things. One is much easier because there are frameworks for this. Those models are already trained in some way, so they are able to like actually give some good answers, even if you don't do any work to optimize them. And also you have all those vibe coding tools now, Cursor and others, that allow you to actually build code very quickly. So it makes it all so easy to have prototypes that actually look good, but it doesn't mean they're production ready. And that's like where the big difference is. The barrier to production, I think, is even harder than before. Like the gap between prototype and production has increased. And that's also something that's changed, right? Yeah. And the last thing that's changed is on the data. We used to say, oh, for a machine learning model, just throw more data at it and good data, but like big data, integrate more data, more variety and more volumes, and then you have a good model. And so it was all about like more data. I think now it's not necessarily more data. It's actually really, you need to put the relevant data, like the data that like really relevant for your use case that allows you to optimize your system. And it's much more nuanced and much more granular than it used to be in terms of the data that you need to integrate, whether it's for knowing where your system is failing or tuning it. Like the data is actually in the way you construct it. It is an enormous challenge on its own, right? It was not as complicated before, right? I think that has not changed. Garbage in, garbage out. If you are really bad data, you will like, and data quality is still very important. So that has not changed, right? So some people may think, oh yeah, like LLMs, they can, even with bad data, they can be okay. No, like it's not production ready. You may be thinking about a demo, but like when you think about a production system, the data needs to be good, right? And the data needs to be very relevant. And the other part that has not changed is more the business aspects. That has not changed too much. It is still, once you build a system, the biggest barrier to adoption is change management. It is also framing the use case and the requirements into the right system. Like all of those things, which are more softer skills of the job, are still pretty much there and are probably even more important than before. If I had to give some advice to a leader, I would say, like right now, agentic AI, it's a nascent technology. We are like in the very, very early days. And every single tech company out there is releasing their agents, right? Snowflake, Salesforce, they all have those agents, right? Procurement agent, marketing agents. Like, I think as a leader, you should not focus on that. You should focus more on like how to create a systematic way to convert business problems into systems that actually can deliver value and to create the right data for them and also the right evaluation. So all of those things are the components that leaders should focus on instead of focusing on, oh, what is the last shiny demo that whatever hyperscalers are released with an agent. Like, yeah, that is really, I think, very important to understand, because we're not here to deliver demos. We're here to deliver production systems that have value, and it's very important to focus on what are the bars to do.
Probably spoken about this the past few podcasts as well, but a big part of the leaders within organization is being sold to daily. There's a new product, a new system, there's a new company, a new startup, and being able to really work out what's best and what's right. And someone was saying that there's a lot of these private equity businesses now who've got massive, they've got a portfolio of clients, large scale enterprise clients. There's actually a job now for a person who just sits between all the portfolio clients and talks to vendors to make sure they're on board and the right ones as well. So that, and you must speak to these people on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. the market is extremely crowded right now in terms of like solutions and tools. As I said, like the speed is much faster than before, like speed to release those products too.
Yeah,
And so it makes it, and the hype is at the highest right now. So it is very important to actually decipher the signal from the
yeah,
noise and also understand what are the barriers to production. Because that's like those shiny agents and demos that you see all the time, like if they don't have the right foundations to go to
yeah.
production,
Especially across large scale businesses. No, great. Okay, could you share a moment where an AI project failed? What
yeah,
went wrong, and what would you do differently if you were starting the same project again tomorrow?
yeah. And I think
Yep.
that will illustrate the point I said about the fact that some of the toughest parts of the of an AI applied AI team is still the business side, is and the human aspects. I'll describe a project that when I was leading the global post-sales data science organization of DataRobot, I was also leading the federal team in the USA. Like they basically like we were engaging with different federal organizations and or public services. We like very often like how we were
Yep.
engaging with them is to deliver end-to-end solutions, right? So either a model or some like dashboard that would allow them to actually make some decisions. One that we built was for one of the governors, one of the states. Like we created a forecasting model where
Of
every
course.
day there would be a
Yep.
forecast. I can't disclose what type of forecast it was, but this forecast would be used to make budgeting decisions based on like let's say economic factors and stuff and like measurements that they would have. And this would be very high visibility. So this forecast would come into a dashboard that say, okay, this is the forecast of the day. These are the reasons why this forecast is made. These
Yep.
are like some of the things you may consider when you budget, right? The model was overall very accurate. The reality is that the way we built the model was like a bit in silo. We didn't have much. We had the
Yep.
requirements. There was an RFP and everything, and they gave us all the requirements. We did very well for what they asked us to do. The problem and what we missed is that we didn't involve their
Yeah.
team in the decision makings related to the model, right? So it means that we had a very good model, but I think that like at that time the
Yeah.
trust towards this model was not very high. Like, why? Because of a lack of engagement with some of their teams who could have potentially, let's say, been involved
Yeah.
in the decision making, like being part of the journey. And so what happens and why it failed, it actually was in production for months and everyone was happy with it. And then even if you have a great
Yep.
model, there'll always be the black swan event. One day, the forecast is very
Yeah.
wrong. And in that case, it was obviously wrong, right? And so someone very influential, very important, when they saw the forecast say,
Yep.
what is this? Let's pardon my French. What is this mess? and it was escalated and everyone like was in the loop of this email and it became like a massive like issue because the problem is that as we didn't involve that
Yeah.
much or enough or sufficiently their stakeholders into the decision making, no one came and stepped up to defend us. And
Yep.
it was internal emails that we didn't even see ourselves. And so because there was no one to defend like the
Of
forecast
course.
or to explain, it's more about education, right? Educating them on the fact that there will be like maybe a 3% likelihood that the forecast is wrong or within outside a certain window, but in most cases it's right. And so eventually like this project was
Yeah.
decommissioned because of this issue, right? What lesson learned there is we need any project, even if you are being asked to do the project silo and build a model and the requirements are quite clear, always involve the users and or some stakeholders who are influential on the customer side in the journey with you.
Yeah.
Show them the trade-offs, show them the decisions to be made, and let them make the decision, right? Because then they will feel they are the ones who are owners of the project and the model, and they'll be the ones like championing you and educating others, like for the project to be successful. That is one aspect that
Definitely.
is very important, that is very often missed, actually. And when we see AI teams, applied AI teams within a business, like or corporate, like engaging with different business lines, they need to do the same. Every single business line need to have like people who are co-owners of the solution. And those co-owners like need to have, let's say, need to be part of the journey of development and deployment of the solution so that they can educate the rest. So those are the change agents, if you want. So that's an example that I think illustrates that point pretty well. Like one forecast that's wrong, even though 100 forecasts before were right, one escalation email, the project is dead. Literally month and month of
Oh,
efforts and
definitely.
like hundreds of thousands
No.
of dollars. Yeah. And what we see right now is all of those
Yep.
infrastructure being built for agentic and RAG and where there's not enough focus on what it takes to get those systems to production grade. I do think like I see a lot of projects failing as well, where they have dismissed the evaluation of the system or all the controls that we need to have in place, the governance for the system to be high quality and trustworthy. And so this trust is everything you need to think about is how do I get my model to be trustworthy for the right people so that it can go to production? How do I get my model to be production grade? And that's something that I see a lot of other projects fail is like people don't think about this.
So just massively focus on the detail, making sure you've got the right people around the table at all times as well. And I suppose taking your time and not rushing it through and trying to get your product into the system straight away. It's quite relevant as well. We've been working some kind of exec search, kind of like high level leadership positions, and from day one it's about always having all stakeholders involved in the process from day one as well, and all the meetings, all the steering meetings, the weekly calls, even when people are busy, because you don't want something to fall through right at the very end when someone comes in maybe with a different opinion or they're looking for something else. So it's relevant as well. No, good.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, on a positive, can you talk us through a moment where the right team, the process or culture created meaningful business impact?
Yeah. I'll take a project that we worked on recently at Snorkel, which I think is representative of a lot of agentic and or LLM-based projects these days. So it was with one of the top telecommunication companies, like it is actually, because where the phase 2 is still ongoing, but the phase 1 is delivered. So they, just like a lot of telcos, they started like using generative AI. Typically, they start either in helping their software engineers or helping their customer supports like division, right? And so in this case, they were building these copilots or these agents to help customer support, like human agents, answer questions, process queries related to billing. For example, a customer who has like a mobile plan and a broadband plan, they would call and say, hey, I want to change the billing cycle for this and that. And you would expect actually in that case that the agents to first tell what's possible based on their contract and then make some changes in database. The idea is to actually start having an agent that can perform some of those tasks, right? Or at least that can answer questions related to billing as the first step. And so that's the project itself, right? So billing queries and answering questions, and then later on potentially make the changes in the databases, right? So when we engaged with them, they were trying to do that with some of the LLMs, of the shelf LLMs. That case was Gemini. And they did a lot of prompting and adding like complex prompts on top. They only could reach 54%. That was in terms of correctness of the outputs from the system. 54% is quite low, right? It's very far from production grade. So one question out of two, like the LLM was not getting it right, like the answer. So either it was not exactly right or it was just plainly wrong. And we actually, how did we make it work? So first of all, let's take a step back, do some analysis of the full end-to-end workflow, right? The workflow of how the data is created, how the experts are engaged into the system, what is the system built upon, like how are the prompts constructed. Looking at all of this, mapping the stakeholders and mapping the teams who actually have the expertise to potentially make this process better. And what we realized is that they had decomposed the system into, I think, 20 segments. They say, oh, there are 20 like types of queries, but it was nowhere near granular enough, right? And so if you like if you're not granular enough, like then there are always edge cases that would appear, and that would sometimes those edge cases are so many of them that it becomes 46% or 50% of your queries that are wrong, right? Because it's all edge cases, right? So how do you capture the edge cases? Decompose the system into like smaller bits that you can solve each of them, right? And so that's the first thing we did is actually put what we call an evaluation framework to really analyze various aspects of the system across a lot of different dimensions that we define. And how do we get there? It's iterative. It's like you don't get it right the first time. It's like you create the evaluation, then you come back to the experts, then you actually analyze like particular data points and particular queries, and you realize you need to make it more granular. It's a loop, like literally within a couple of weeks, we went through 30 iteration loops of like expert giving us feedback for us to decompose the system in the right way. So that's the first thing, is involvement of the experts, of the people who know what good look like, into the design of this evaluation framework that allows us to understand where the system is failing, make the evaluation much more granular and much more aligned with how those experts think. And that's so this feedback loop and this iteration cycle is really the first thing we did. And I'd say the second thing is really like this, having a data first mindset. When you have an edge case that the system is not good at solving, that's fine. Just create like this edge case as a scenario, integrate the scenario in your evaluation, integrate the scenario in your tuning of the system. And those scenarios, like creating almost a library of all of the scenarios and the edge cases so that you eventually address them, is really important. And that's a data-centric approach, right? How do you construct this data set iteratively so it captures all the different scenarios, and so that eventually the system works very well across all of what you expect it to work very well on. And so this data-centric approach, like having these benchmark data sets, I recall, integrated as part of the feedback loop again, in addition to the evaluation framework, allowed us to evaluate the system, know where it was failing, and then propose for all of those failure modes, like fixes and changes to the system so that the system gets very optimized across all of the expectation. And then so we reached within 3 months, I think 2.5 months actually, we reached 95% correctness of the answer versus against the 56 that they had obtained within months and months of work on this. And so it's really set the foundations right, create the iteration cycle, create an iterative loop, and have a data-centric approach. Those are the 3 ingredients that allowed us to actually get it to production.
I think this is quite an important question as well. Like, probably for a lot of people I'm working with and companies we're working with, there is a lot of people at the start of their journey are just starting to hire people and really getting moving. So you scaled DataRobot from 1 person in EMEA to more than 30 during hypergrowth. Looking back, what would you tell someone starting a similar journey to do or avoid in their first 12 months?
So when I started to hire that team, I was 28. Like I had never been a manager. I was told by the CEO and founder who, trust me, okay, now you are EMEA leader for all the technical functions. That was brutal. Like I made mistakes, like everyone, right? And that's how you learn. I made a lot of mistakes and learned from those mistakes. And what I learned, I'd say the most important, when you're in hyper growth phase in a sector that's as like dynamic and fast moving as AI is, you need a particular type of people, right? Like people who would actually thrive in an environment that's a bit less structured, a bit very dynamic. And I use a framework for this. We call the ICCE framework. So it's intelligence, coachability, character, and experience. It's basically mapping the different candidates like across like those dimensions. And our particular things that test for character and coachability. Why those 2 things is that a hypergrowth phase means like lack of structure. The structure will be created as you grow and as you expand the team. And so you need people who have the right character for that. And some of the characters, for example, I'll be looking at is one, a deep sense of ownership, right? They can't expect everything to be defined. If there's something that doesn't work, they take ownership of fixing it and or providing the feedback. So deep sense of ownership is one thing. Like also people who are very driven, people who fight as well, like people who would not like give up in front of an obstacle or would be quite autonomous. And so those are the things that are particular questions I would ask and situations that I would analyze for the interview process to actually like look at those character traits, right? And the second is, I said coachability is the other one that's very important. You can't compromise on character and some of the character traits I've just described, and you can't compromise on on coachability. Coachability, obviously intelligence as well, but I think this one is more obvious. Coachability is actually a bit less obvious. Like when you are hypergrowth and you are a bit unstructured, like you learn a lot along the way, and you need people who are open to learning and also learning from their own mistakes. And this is what coachability is. People who proactively ask for feedback. People, when you give them feedback, they don't get defensive. Like all of those things. Actually, I often give a case study interview, and I'm the one who would lead it. Even though I would be the second line manager, I would go and do the interview, and I would specifically like find case studies where there's no right answer in some cases because there are like considerations or things that may lead you to one direction or another. And so it's quite easy to challenge the candidates like during this case study interview. And if I challenge them and they start being defensive straight away on the call, that is a like big red flag for me. They like when I challenge, they need to be open to listening, and they need to ask more, and they need to be like actually acknowledging the feedback. And maybe they won't change their mind, but at least acknowledging and kind of making a trade-off. This is a type of thinking that's coachability that is extremely important for me. I hired in the early days people who I didn't test on that, who ended up being not coachable, that created a lot of issues later on. People who are not coachable are also people who, as there is change when the organization evolves, would be negative, and also people who don't grow actually very often. And so that's, even if it's a superstar, like you can have a lot of problems related to having lack of coachability.
Definitely taking notes there. Again, I'm probably at MBN now. We're probably going to be looking for people like that as well, especially with the explosion of AI and the amount of positions that are coming in. So I love people like yourself, like the 28-year-old, just given a big challenge and probably having to go and work a lot of it out as well. There's a lot of people who would shy away from that, and probably over 90% of people would, maybe that would be too much for them. They'd shy away from it. And I don't know the type of person you are. I know how busy you are, and I know you're probably covering multiple time zones in any given day, and the amount of work and effort you guys put into really driving your career and driving a business forward. Companies are lucky to have people like yourself. You're a real credit to them. So I love all the kind of, this is my kind of thing. Just I love all the technical AI and all that, but I love just the character of people who can go and build companies, teams, and get it going. That's what gets me going. But there's a lot of talk about AI shortage. From your experience, what do leaders most often get wrong when trying to hire for applied AI or AI engineering positions?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned some of those, but if I try to summarize for that question in particular, is don't hire just on like how brilliant the CV and some of the accomplishments are related to technical accomplishments, or don't hire based on the GitHub, right? Yes, it's almost a prerequisite that like the person is picking up new technology, is able to show it. Even if I have a top contributor of whatever open source projects like in front of me, like if they don't pass the bar of some of the other things I've mentioned, coachability or character, they will not be a good fit for a team I'm building, right? So I'd say like it's character, coachability, humility. If you don't look at that and you hire the person, you will regret it later, sooner rather than later, very often. Sometimes people think, oh, I'll hire this person so that finally I can say that my KPI around hiring, I've reached it, but they don't think about the long term of what this person means if they make compromises. I actually don't compromise. I don't compromise anymore. I've sometimes compromised, and that was just, I always backfired. And like faster than I thought, right? And sometimes much bigger proportion than I thought. And then you waste time and it's negativity created because of this backfire, right? So I'd say don't focus too much on just the technical part or the experience. It's not only about the CV, and I see all those job descriptions like, oh, we need someone who has used LangChain for 5 years. This LangChain has been around for 3 years, literally. So first of all, like, why do you even put that in a job description, right? It's not about this. It's about the person, having curiosity, having humility, having, let's say, the right character, as I mentioned, being coachable, and someone who also you can put into a culture of like open communication and feedback, because that's what allows like these organizations to move quickly. AI is moving so quickly. You need people who have those characteristics from the get-go. I think on the character traits, by the way, just the one thing is EQ is as important as IQ, like in this kind of roles. So I think summarizes a bit what I've said. But in terms of skills, like pure technical skills, I think in these current markets, like it's not about a list of tools being used. Yes, okay, if someone uses a lot of tools, it proves that curiosity might come somehow. But like I actually prefer people who think about the system overall and think about what matters to go to production. So there are not many people who've put an agentic AI system in production. Very few right now in the market. And what it takes to actually put something in production is so complex, like technically, but also like from a human perspective, as I've described. So having this evidence of going to production is definitely something I would look at, right? And that's a skill. It's a technical plus like human skill to actually do and go to production. And so the other thing is pure technical skill is LLM evaluation. Is if you are talking about agentic AI and you're just thinking about it as an orchestration problem, this is not about taking an agent that's generic and then plugging it into a process. That's way beyond that. Very often, on most use cases, you'd have to control the outputs. You have to make sure that the system is not doing the wrong thing, and because you have a lot of risk associated with the system. So like there's an entire word called LLM evaluation, which is like, how do you measure how good the system is across different dimensions, different segments? And so this is a very complex, actually, a part of agentic AI. And so people who If someone tells me I've put something in production, an agentic AI system without evaluation, very often I won't believe that's like, first, it's either a system that's not critical at all or a system that didn't get adopted. And the other one is, I think the role
Yeah,
of AI product manager is coming. Evaluation, the way you do evaluation is you write prompts for evaluators. And so this is human language at the end of the day. And so those are requirements of what good looks like. You need people who have this business understanding of what good looks like for in the eyes of the business stakeholders, and we can translate it to the machine, in that case, in prompts. And that's, you don't need an AI engineer for that necessarily. I think more and more you have those pure business people with some technical knowledge will be able to actually do these parts of the job.
really good.
Yeah.
I know the listeners will get a lot from this as well. I know even like from myself, who's I've been in data talent for just over 20 years now, but I'm finding myself like a couple of times a week reaching out to people like yourself. I've got a few people in the industry working. I've worked in AI for a long time, and I'm phoning them up and asking them about, look, we've got this job spec from a client. Is this actually something we can find? And can you find these skills and these skills together? And it's been really useful to have good people around who can help just evaluate what a lot of companies are looking for stuff at the moment, as you said, that doesn't even exist, and trying to match certain skills with AI skills that just don't go. You're either
Mm.
one or the other. So it's a fascinating world. Really good. So thanks for that. And then, like, right now,
Yeah.
there seems
Yeah.
like everyone
Exactly.
seems to be releasing generic agents. From where you sit, what's mostly hype and what's actually useful in practice?
Yeah. So in terms of hype and what's useful, as I said, we are in the infancy of this
Yep,
market. It's so immature, the agentic AI space. Like agentic, and whether, just to clarify agentic, what we
yep,
mean by this is typically an AI system that has access to tools. So you give it like the flexibility to let's say, query a database or
yep,
extract information from documents. Like those are tools, right? Maybe run a calculator or like even book a travel potentially. So that's like these agents who have this autonomy, or are typically a bit more autonomous than what just a simple chatbot would be. So they can reason with multi
yep,
steps. They can have access to tools. They have a memory, so they remember from one step to another what happened before. So that those are like
yep,
the agentic AI systems, and that's an agents, like what I've described. Agents. The thing is, every like big tech company, as I mentioned before, is releasing like some sort of generic
yep,
agents, or procurement agent, legal agents, or sales agents, or meeting booking agents, or whatever it is, right? The reality is that, if, as far as I know, unless you don't care about quality, and
yep,
if the agent does something completely wrong, you don't care. There are some use cases like this. There are very few, but you may have sometimes systems where the expectation in terms of quality is very low. That's okay. Then in that case, you're fine. But in most cases, like a generic agent
yeah,
will not meet your business requirements, right? The generic agent, the more a generic agent would have access to a lot of tools, would have access to a lot like, would be very autonomous in that, in a sense. Right now, we don't have yet the expertise and technology as
yep,
to build generic agents that are accurate for particular tasks. Like, this is just not the case today. Like, the only way to do it is to actually retune and evaluate the system, as I described before. And so that is, so generic agent, this is hype for me, right? Like, it may be a starting point. It may be, and maybe some of those agents that are very more narrow and more constrained, some of those agents for the
yep,
tasks that they are supposed to do are good, right? So those ones, maybe use them, right? Use them as tools if you want. But like, the generic agent who's supposed to plan a lot of stuff and do complex workflows that a human would typically do, we are not able to actually get the systems to a good level of
yep,
quality right now. At some point, we may, but right now it's just too much. It's such a like space of,
yeah,
there are too many dimensions, and so it means that the agent is very hard to really optimize in a
yep,
generic way. So that is complete hype to me. And second is solutions that don't like solutions for the business that don't have a concrete,
yeah,
as I mentioned, evaluation framework on top. So when we talk about, oh, I delivered this use case, and there's so many
yep,
companies that are like telling me this, right? I delivered this use case for that particular team, and I'm like, and I would ask them, what is the quality? What
yeah,
is how correct it is? Do you have measurements of like how good the system is? And they tell me, oh no, we didn't do really this, or oh, we got this team to actually look at the output, and I say it was fine.
yeah,
The it was fine is not
yep,
scientific. The same way in machine learning back in the days, we are always starting with some sort of like accuracy metric or some metric that measure how good the system is. You need to do exactly the same in the world of LLMs and agents, right? And if you don't have this evaluation framework that is well thought out from the get-go, like to me, this solution is not a solution that will go to production. People will say sometimes, oh yeah, I've deployed, but they mean they deployed in the infrastructure. If these agents are not good
Yeah.
or these systems are not good, they will not be used. And that's, or they will, because they're not trustworthy. That's it, right? And so that is where I think there's still a lot of hype is people talking about a solution, but actually having, without thinking
Yeah.
about how they evaluate and measure the system. They will never go to production, in my opinion. Right
Yeah.
now, what are more useful, and I mentioned it, is the agents that are much more constrained and narrow. Oh, I have maybe an agent or like a tool like that allows me to extract information from specific information from a contract. It will only extract this type of information. But yes, some of those tasks now we're able to automate them. Honestly, much better than we used to. We may, with machine learning, have reached like 85% correctness. Now we can actually, for some of those that are narrow, it's 99.9999% correct, and everything is done in the right way as long as it's constrained. And that's the thing, is that there are some agents that are very heavily constrained that are tied to a business process that is very well known. In that case, those agents, yeah, they're definitely useful. And that's what like generic agents, hype, agents that are tied to business processes or business specific workflows or that are like constraints that are indeed very accurate. This is not hype. This is actually useful. Yeah. So that's, I think at the end of the day, you need evaluation to tune and evaluate your model. If you're not able to measure it, you can't trust it and you can't have ROI. And so like this generic agent that where you have no evaluation from the get-go are complete hype. And I think it's one of the reasons why, because there's so much investment going into those generic agents that are actually not that good, right? That's where there's indeed an AI bubble, or at least like this kind of like hype cycle will go down because people realize, wow, it's actually not solving my problem.
No, ideal. Have you got any specific examples where maybe generic approaches fall short? Or
yeah, let's say we could talk about some of the customer support agents where right now, like a lot of companies, they release a customer support agent, and like when you use the agents, you can't actually tune it, you can't change it, you can't integrate your own business knowledge. The reality is that every single customer support organization functions differently, right? And so they may improve them so that they can reason even if in something they've not seen before. But the reality is that you need to test it for your organization, for your particular business process, and for your use case. And in the case of the use case I mentioned earlier, billing queries, Vodafone and O2, they will have very different ways to bill customers based on the contracts they have. And if you're not able to plug those contracts and standard operating procedures and get the feedback from your experts into the system, those agents are the hype ones, like the ones where they are actually not useful. I've seen, and I won't mention particular names of hyperscalers, but I see hyperscalers releasing these agent workflows, like tooling platforms. And then when I look at, okay, can I extract, let's say, from this agent platform, like at least the reasoning that happened from this agent so that I can analyze where the system is making mistake? No, you can't. I'm like, why? Can I add an evaluation on top? No, you can't. There's no evaluation. Or yes, there's evaluation, but it's fully off the shelf, like a metric that they decided, again, that it's not aligned and calibrated to your business. And those are the things where it doesn't make sense, right? Like, why would I use an agent where I can't measure it in the context of my business? And those are the things that are like in customer support, you see a lot of those agents. And I think 90% of them is complete hype. Yeah.
examples, I've probably used these myself now when I think about it through like different companies and different services. I never really thought about it. You've explained that well to me. You have said that the real value comes from tailored, high quality systems built around specific business needs. For a leader listening right now who wants to move in that direction, what are the first 2 or 3 practical steps they should take, maybe in the next quarter?
Yeah. So, like, in order to get AI right, I would say like practical steps. Think about AI not as just a process or just a use case or a solution. Think about AI as almost a capability you're building. So practically, what it means as a leader is like beyond like what I've mentioned on recruitment and hiring, is think about how to create a repeatable process in your organization to solve some of the biggest bottlenecks to go to production. What are the biggest bottlenecks? I mentioned them. One is like the actual like like what I call business framing. So I take some requirements from the business and translate that into technical requirements. And so also, how do you prioritize the right use case? It's another one where you look at all the ideas because there are so many ideas, because it's so approachable, it's so easy and accessible. Like literally ideas is hundreds and hundreds of them. So how do you take those ideas and you just like filter the ones that are worth developing versus the ones that is complete hype, right? And so looking at risks, it's looking at value for each of them. And based on that and sponsorship, and based on this, just focus on like the ones where you can have quick wins based on your current level of experience in infrastructure. But really this process needs to be somehow repeatable and needs to be also reapplicable, like from one idea or from one business line to another. If you're working with business lines, if you're working with clients, the same. Yeah. So that's one, is really one practical step, define this process from, right? And then it can improve later. But second is think about like the fact that, let's say if there are those generic agents, and eventually those agents can, if they can be like, say, customized for your business in a, let's say, quite deep way using evaluation or experts in the loop, what becomes your differentiated assets against your competition is your, like, would be your data. So why? Experts, like, how do you capture your own expertise and your own, let's say, specifications into the system? Today, like the vector for that is data. So data is how you transfer knowledge into those AI systems. So you need to think about an infrastructure on developing your data with experts in the loop. So it means having annotation workflows like from experts, like that you can like use and leverage. It means having evaluation workflows with experts in the loop. It means also thinking about once it's in production, how do you involve the experts as well? So thinking about this in a repeatable way from one use case to another is definitely also very important right now. Now, and probably the third thing is, let's say like third and fourth thing is, one is evaluation, like thinking about a repeatable way to evaluate your model and measure how good they are. And the fourth one would be how to like drive adoption. Once you create like the best agent that is able to really nail all of the business requirements, how do you actually get the users to adopt it? And that's like, you need specific people in the team and a specific process to actually make it effective, right? Because if you start losing momentum and you didn't do the right like change management steps early on, then you may construct the best agents out there that are the most suitable for the business requirements. It never gets adopted. And so adoption and value is everything here. And so think about this upfront and make it repeatable.
And for non-technical executives, how can they tell if their applied AI teams are truly performing, not just building demos? Is there one or two metrics or signals they should be tracking?
Yeah. And I think for that, yeah, good question. I would say the main thing you need to look at is for solutions or like use cases or projects that are delivered, what is the adoption of those, right? So be a KPI. And you have ways to measure adoption. It could be, I don't know, like a number of users per day or unique users per day, or it could be like how many like requests or how many prompts. Like this is something to capture to what extent your solution that you're bringing are adopted, but also once you, let's say, create a solution, how fast you get to adoption. So I think adoption is everything, because if you create the best system and no one is using it, then that's useless, right? It has no value. So adoption is probably like the first thing you need to look at. I would say the second thing is more related to speed, right? If you're an applied AI team and you're not able to, because it's by nature, applied AI is extremely iterative. You don't know necessarily upfront, and that's what's different from, let's say, like traditional software engineering. You have specifications, and the specifications are like, it's quite what allows you to get to the specification. In a lot of cases, you can decompose, and then the estimates of time that it would take you to deliver is a bit more obvious. It's hard, but it's definitely less hard than in AI. In AI, you actually don't necessarily know to what extent you can make the system high quality based on the expectation of the business upfront. You don't know that upfront, and you need to first baseline the system, understand how good it is, and then you need to like then set expectation, right, related to it. So I would say, so by nature, because of this iteration cycle, what really matters in an applied AI team that measures how good they are, to me, is like how fast they can iterate, right? If you have a project and there is one iteration every 3 weeks, that is a project that will take forever, because it's routinely, like when I say iteration, is when you have a loop between the business and the experts and the AI team, and then integrate this feedback. These iteration loops should be part of what you build, and they should be like very fast as well. And so you need to almost like a development cycle, like in sprints, that is very adapted to that. That's like where you can move very quickly and constantly adapt, right? And so how fast you can do this, how fast you can deploy the first prototype, this is like a very good measure for me of how good an applied AI team is.
Finally, if you could give one piece of advice to a leader who wants to get AI right over the next few years, what would it be? And what is one small practical action they can take this week to move in that direction?
I think partially is like indeed creating these processes that I mentioned, like a repeatability across the process for evaluation, for involving your experts, for qualifying the use cases, as well as making sure the projects are being adopted. So that would be, for me, like the critical point to think about is, let's look at when you join an organization, what is the like current state of all of those things? Do you have a process to understand what to work on? Do you have a process to make sure that what you deliver is being adopted? Do you have a process to evaluate your system to make sure it meets customer requirements? You have a process to involve the business into your system so that you can capture the knowledge into the system, right? So if you like, based on where the organization is, you need to actually have a concrete roadmap for each of those dimensions of how you improve those things, because you can't deliver like end to end without at scale, without actually creating repeatability around those things. Now you can do one project, but it will be fully custom, right? If you don't think about it in a repeatable way. Then you also have everything around the infrastructure and architecture and repeatability of the, let's say the deployment aspects as well. That's another thing you probably need to look at, like what differentiates the prototype to go to production and the system being live. So you need to think about the process that makes it like somehow repeatable from one project to another. Otherwise, it will very quickly become legacy, right? Everything you developed like in the early days, it will be, you may not have all the like experience or expertise to actually make it very much future-proof. And so if you don't want this to be a legacy after a couple of years, you probably need to think like through straight away on what is my platform for deployment and for defining the solution is, so that you can then be much more effective like in the future as you take more and more use cases.
No, thanks very much. It's been great. I could sit and talk to you for another few hours. It's been fascinating, and it's been really good to hear your journey and what you're doing and your success you're having and the way you're driving these companies forward and driving the industry forward. Really good, Andre. But just before we go, do you want to let people know where they can find you if anybody needs to speak to you or wants to hear more about what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Like the easiest way is to contact me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. So my first name, last name on LinkedIn. And I can give, if there is a fit, like my phone number, and I would be very easy to reach on WhatsApp. Yeah. So please, add me and connect with me.
Andre,
and
excellent.
we can take this one.
Get out to the market. But thanks again. Really appreciate it, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to A Class Act. If you've enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow the show so you never miss a conversation. And if you're building a data team or making a key leadership hire, reach out to us at MBN Solutions using the link in the show notes.